Alright guys, so today we're going to talk about the basics of quadratic graphs. And we're going to be on page 33. Alright, so we know from our previous lesson that quadratic equations are written as ax squared plus bx plus c, and this is going to be equal to 0. And really our 0 is our y value here. So you'll see that we change the y value as we go on. So when you graph a quadratic, you're going to get a shape, right? So if we graph linear, we're going to get a line. If we graph a quadratic, we're going to get this thing called a parabola. And a parabola is really just a U-shaped graph. All right. Now we have two types of parabolas. We have where a is equal, or excuse me, where a is positive, and where a is negative. So those are our two types. So where a is positive, your graph is going to look like a regular U, just like that. Where it extends forever and ever up, and we have this bottom point right here called a minimum. Where a is negative, it's going to go the opposite way, so it's going to look like an upside down U. It goes forever and ever to infinity downward, and we're going to have this top point called a maximum. This is also called our turning point. So when it asks for a turning point, it's either talking about a minimum or a maximum. All right, so we're going to graph a quadratic equation here. And first thing we're going to do is go ahead and draw a graph. All right, and the example that we're going to use today is going to be x squared plus 2x minus 1. All right, and so the way you're going to graph it is we're going to make this xy table here, and we're going to come up with some points to go on our graph, and we should see that U shape. All right. So if you want to go ahead and find some easy x's to work with, so I like to stick with like -1, 0, 1, 2, those kind of x's, because they're just easy to plug in. So if we start with -1, we're going to have -1 squared. That's going to give us +1. -1 times 2 is going to give us -2. So we have 1 and -2. That's going to give us -1. And then we have -1. So really, if we wanted to write that out, we would say -1 squared plus 2 times -1 minus 1. And we would solve this out. So we'd end up with +1 minus 2 minus another 1, which is going to give us -2. So we do have the point on the graph -1, -2. So we can plot that. -1, -2. There's a point on our graph. If I plug in 0, we end up with 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 1. So 0 plus 0 minus 1. So this point becomes 0, -1. Then we can plug in +1. We get 1 plus 2 is 3, minus 1 is 2. So we have 1, +1, +2. All right, So it looks like our curve's going to be going upward like this. So we might want to come over here and try some more negative numbers just to get our other side of our curve here. So I'm going to put in this time, let's try putting in -2. So I've got -2 squared plus 2 times -2 minus 1. So it's going to give me +4 minus 4 minus 1, which is going to give me -1. So I come over to -2 and go down to -1. So do you see how that's starting to create that curve upward? So we can continue. We'll do one more just to get us our 5 points here. So I'm going to do -3. So I've got -3 squared plus 2 times -3 minus 1. So it's going to give me 9 plus -6 is actually going to give me 3 minus 1 is going to give me 2. So I'm going to go to -3, +2, which is about right here. All right. I think that one's supposed to be about right there. All right, so we can connect these dots, and we want to make sure we make it like a little curve, and we can extend it right there. All right, so because our A value, our very first value, was positive, we should have ended up with this right side up U. And our minimum value is right here. So our minimum is, and it's going to be a point, and it's going to be the point -1, -2. All right, now the other thing that we want to talk about today is this thing called the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is going to run right down the very center of your graph, and it splits your graph into 2 equal pieces, the left side and the right side. And there's a way to find the axis of symmetry, but if you notice, the axis of symmetry is just crossing through the x-axis. So we know it's going to be x equals a number. So in this case, it's going to be x equals -1. That line right there is only going to have a value of x equals -1. The formula to find this would be -b over 2a. So that's our axis of symmetry formula. Now, in order to be able to solve this formula, we have to be able to pick out our a, b, and our c. So that's the first thing we're going to do. So our a value from up here, if there's no number in front of your x, we know that a is equal to 1. The b value is the coefficient of this x. That would be +2. And your c value is your constant. So that would be -1. So the only ones we're really using is this a value and this b value. And we're going to set it up into this equation. So it says the opposite of b. So we're going to put in -2 times 2, or over, divided by 2 times a, so 2 times 1. And we're going to simplify. So we have -2 over 2, which is going to give us that -1. And we always want to set that equal to x. It's our x value here. All right? So our formula, -b over 2a, is going to yield -1. That's our axis of symmetry. That's -1.